Welcome to this brief Bible dive with Beautiful Savior Lutheran Church in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, and with me, Pastor Nick. We're in this series of brief Bible dives where we're summarizing books of the Bible, especially the littler books of the Bible, so that you can get a quick understanding of their message and why they matter. And today we're talking about the writings of the prophet Obadiah. Obadiah. How often does that come up? So as we dive into Obadiah today, we're going to focus on the right way and the wrong way to treat our enemies. So for starters, Obadiah is the shortest book of the Old Testament. The book is a prophecy delivered by Obadiah, who is a prophet of Judah, the southern kingdom of the Jewish people that was still there. And it was, again, well, sort of still there. You'll get that in a second. And it was delivered against the Edomites. And it's believed that Obadiah delivered this prophecy just after 586 BC, when Jerusalem was completely destroyed by the invading Babylonians. So to give you some backstory, many years beforehand, way back in Genesis, there were these twin brothers, Esau and Jacob. Jacob tricked their father, Isaac, and stole the birthright and the blessing that was intended to go to Esau, the firstborn. The firstborn as a twin, but by mere moments, but still the firstborn. So Esau eventually forgave Jacob, but their descendants carried this kind of animosity, and they carried it for like 1,000 years. And Esau eventually forgave Jacob in their lifetimes, but animosity for 1,000 years. But the descendants carried this for over and over and over again, generation after generation. So Jacob's descendants, they became the Jewish people, and Esau's descendants became the Edomites. Now, they lived in pretty close proximity, really next-door neighbors by ancient world standards. And the Jewish people lived more on the west side of the Dead Sea, and the Edomites lived more on the east side of the Dead Sea in what we would call present-day Jordan. Jordan, the country. And so the Edomites lived in cities that were carved out of rock, such as Petra in present-day Jordan, which maybe you know of because it kind of became famous during the Indiana Jones and Last Crusade movie. It's where the characters found the Holy Grail. But as the Babylonian army was moving through and conquering much of this area, the Edomites first stepped to the side. They tried to stay neutral, while the Jewish people, which were kind of like their cousins, resisted the invaders. And this led, of course, to the conquest of Judah, the complete destruction of Jerusalem, the temple, the exile of the leading citizens, to Babylon. It was a horrible situation. But then, see, this is the problem that God had. The Edomites decided to profit from the situation. As Jewish refugees fled for safety to Edom, the Edomites then actually captured them, killed some of them, and sent others back to the invading Babylonians. And so, so basically, like, as they're invading Judah and doing all these things, the Edomites looked at it and said, well, you know what? We're going to steal whatever we can from the Jewish households while the Babylonians are coming through, and we're going to steal from these refugees. So Obadiah prophesied that as a result, Edom would actually suffer a similar fate, which they did in just a few short years when they were invaded themselves and then plundered. So remnants of the Edomites continued to exist for many years after the destruction of their kingdom. In fact, actually, King Herod the Great, the king who was appointed by the Romans before Jesus was born, tried to have Jesus killed. He was descended from the Edomites, actually from the Summaries too, which is kind of interesting. But after the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple by the Roman Empire in 70 AD, at this point, like any sense of the Edomites, they just went away. The lineage was just gone. Despite all this destruction and prophesying against the Edomites, the book of Obadiah actually concluded in a weirdly kind of hopeful way. Although Obadiah foretold the complete end of the Edomites, He also predicted that God would return the Jewish exiles and build a new kingdom that would include Edom and other nations. And we know that less than a century later, this is exactly what began to take place as the Jewish exiles would come back home and start to rebuild Jerusalem. Now, sadly, in Obadiah, we hear of a nation, Edom, though, who gloated. I mean, they profited off of the pain and destruction of their neighbors. They profited off of the refugees coming into their land. They profited off of these people who are really cousins of theirs. And we hear that God, well, let's say it mildly, wasn't pleased. Let's say it less mildly, was very, very upset with the Edomites' actions. And it really sets the stage for when we consider people in our lives that maybe we think, well, we keep them at arm's length. They might be related to us, but we sort of look at them like kind of enemies. And it gives us the thought then of how God calls us not to gloat over the pain of our own enemies, but instead to love them and even to bless them. So with this struggle between the descendants of Jacob, the people of Judah, and the descendants of Jacob's twin brother Esau, the people of Edom, they might have been two different nations, but they were right next door to each other. The people intermingled, and really they were cousins. It kind of reminds me of a story of Martin Niemöller. Martin Niemöller was a Lutheran pastor in Germany who fought the Nazis. He was in opposition to the Nazis. And so every day after being taken into captivity, what did he do? He prayed for the guards. He prayed for the guards, the Nazi guards. And this kind of confused the other prisoners. And then they finally said to him, why would you do such a thing? Why would you pray for these Nazi guards? And his reply simply was, do you know anyone who needs your prayers more than your enemies? It's a bit of the message of the book of Obadiah. So that's the story of the book of Obadiah in a nutshell. To learn more about our congregation, go to bslcmi.org. Of course, we'd love for you to share this video, like it, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now go out and love God and love your neighbors.